Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and get things rolling. My name is Sarah Bostic, and I am the Sustainable Agriculture Extension Agent with the University of Florida in both Sarasota and DeSoto counties. And I am joined today with a couple of my fantastic coworkers, including Carol Wyatt Evans, who is the Chemicals and the Environment Agent in Sarasota County, as well as Mindy Hannick, who is the the School and Community Gardens Coordinator for Sarasota County. So I think most of you know that this is part of our edible gardening series. And today's topic is nematodes. If there are other topics that you want to join us for, there's the list right there on your screen. We are also recording each of these sessions. And actually, are we recording this one? Yes, we're recording. Great. Sometimes I forget to hit record. So we also are recording these and putting these on YouTube, on our YouTube channel. And I will send you that link as well in the next week or so as a follow-up email. So my screen does not want to change. Let's see. There we go. So this is the 6th session in our series. And today's session is on nematodes. And nematodes cause people all sorts of problems that they are not aware of. So it's a great topic to do a quick deep dive into. We'll talk today about minimizing damage from nematodes. So we hear it all the time. People come into our office, they say they used to be so great at gardening and then they moved to Florida, or they've lived in Florida their whole lives and are gardening for the first time and they can't figure out what's not working. And very likely in Florida and across much of the southern part of the United States, the answer often is nematodes. It's something that is a very hidden damage creator that unless you know they are there, you don't recognize what is causing the issues in your garden. So what are nematodes? Most people have never heard of nematodes, but it turns out they happen to be the most numerous multicellular animal on Earth. That's a pretty phenomenal thing. And a handful of soil actually contains thousands of nematodes. And there's actually a typo on my screen. There's over 25,000 species of nematodes worldwide. That's pretty phenomenal, especially for a creature that most of humanity has never even heard of. So what you can see there on your screen are pictures. These two are pictures that I took from plants that I pulled out of our demo garden down in Sarasota County. These two pictures are actually the root system of a cucumber plant. And anyone who has grown cucumbers before knows that that is not what a cucumber root system should look like. Those little balls that you can see, that is damage from nematodes, where nematodes have actually bored into the root system of those cucumber plants and caused a major reaction in the plant, where the plant basically creates a little bubble around those nematodes. And those nematodes effectively are stopping the plant from accessing the nutrients and water that they need to stay alive. There's many different types of nematodes, and they all look actually quite different on a microscopic level. Some of them look pretty typically like a worm, just on a microscopic level, but others are kind of bizarre looking little creatures. Here's a couple more pictures of what nematode damage can look like. And nematodes they're microscopic, so you can't actually see them with your bare eyes. And if you do want to look at them under a microscope, you actually have to go through a whole process to be able to see them. You can't just put some soil under a slide and see nematodes. You actually have to do a special series of steps. And nematodes as a whole they're parasites, but each type of nematode is a parasite to something slightly different. So some are parasites of insects, some are parasites of plants, others of animals, some are actually parasites of fungi, even bacteria. They're a pretty wild creature. For most gardeners, most nematodes are good, but there are actually a few that do a lot of damage, including the types of nematodes that you can see that are affecting these plants. This is actually the root system of a tomato plant, believe it or not. That looks nothing like what a tomato plant root system should look like. That's also from our demo garden. And this is caused by a type of nematode called guava root knot nematode. And over here, we have a picture of these cute little baby carrots. Turns out these cute little baby carrots, also grown in our demo garden at work, were actually in the ground for about 4 months before I pulled them out to take these pictures. And that's as big as they ever got. That's about, they're about 2 inches, 1 to 2 inches long each. And you can see those little balls at the bottom that were keeping them from getting the nutrients that they need. So that's the sort of effect that nematodes have on plants. So here's some more pictures of that tomato plant that's badly infected with guava root knot nematode. So to give you some background on how this plant came to look the way it did, I transplanted from nice healthy little transplants in mid-October, which is a totally appropriate time down here in southern Florida to transplant your tomatoes. It would be a terrible time to transplant your tomatoes in most of the country, but down here in Southwest Florida, it's the perfect time. So I transplanted it in mid-October, and then I pulled this plant out and took pictures in mid-January. And you can see this plant never got particularly big, and it certainly was not a healthy plant. It was spindly, it was unhealthy, it was yellow, and then it just kind of gave up and died. And you can see that its root system looks like a root system that can't sustain the plant, and it didn't. So oftentimes what you see up top looks just like a plant that is struggling or is diseased or needs more water or something, and you can't quite figure it out. So sometimes it's good to have a sacrificial plant that you actually just pull out and see what that root system looks like. And if it looks anything like that, you've got nematodes. And I wanted to share some pictures of one of the amazing master gardeners that volunteers a huge amount through our office in Sarasota County. Arnie has been a lifetime grower of all sorts of vegetables, and these are some pictures that he recently shared with me. So Arnie has figured out how to kind of work with the fact that nematodes are here to stay in Florida and across a lot of the southeastern United States. So these are root systems from tomato plants that Arnie planted. He also planted them in October, but he didn't actually pull those plants until April, which was 3 months later than I pulled the plants from our demo garden. And he's figured out how to just keep feeding and watering in just tiny little bits, and keeping those plants as healthy as possible so that the parts of the root system that are still healthy and able to function can pull enough nutrients and water into those plants. So the plants that these root systems correspond to actually both made it to about 10 to 12 feet tall, which is pretty amazing. And they were infected with other sorts of tomato diseases, but Arnie never saw any signs of nematode damage, which is pretty amazing. So that's a really big key to it is if your nematode infestation isn't totally full blown, there are some roots that still do function. And so learning how to just give them little bits of fertilizer and little bits of water at a time that those small root systems can pull up is key. So not all plants are similarly susceptible to nematodes. In terms of vegetables, nematodes tend to like any of the plants that produce fruit and any of the plants that we eat as like a root crop. So if you think about it in terms of plants that produce something sweet that we eat, so like tomatoes, carrots, beets, those sorts of things, fruits and roots are the things that nematodes tend to like the best. So if you're in a really nematode heavy area, those may not be the very best things for you to grow. The veggie crops that nematodes tend to avoid are in the brassica family. The brassica family is a huge family of vegetables. Things like kale, collards, broccoli, cauliflower, cabbage, radishes, turnips, mustard, arugula, Brussels sprouts, bok choy, tatsoi, kohlrabi, the list goes on and on. So if you think about it kind of like that cabbage family of plants, there's actually a chemical that all of those plants produce that tend to repel nematodes a bit. And then in general, nematodes also don't like herbs. So if you know that you're struggling with nematodes, it might be best to stick with things in that brassica family and herbs. So the particular chemical that nematodes tend to be repelled by is actually that same chemical, the glucosinolates, that if you've ever smelled like rotting broccoli that smells really bad, it's a sulfur-containing compound. That same chemical that we don't like the smell of is the chemical that nematodes also tend to be repelled by. And it's in the process of actually rotting and breaking down that chemical is released. So it's a great thing to just incorporate things like your broccoli plants down into the ground when you're done with them. That will help to repel out some of those nematodes. And then there's lots of other ways to go about helping to control nematodes. Nematodes are never going to go away. They are a part of the soil ecosystem. So the best you can do is really to help figure out how to control their populations, help keep them at a minimum. And the biggest part of that is making sure that you're supporting a really healthy soil food web. And that healthy soil food web includes a lot of beneficials. We don't often think of what's underground as also being beneficial insects and microbes, but there's millions of beneficial insects and microbes underground, and helping to keep soil really healthy by keeping the organic matter content of your soil high is really helpful, because those beneficial insects and microbes in the soil actually eat plant parasitic nematodes. There's also quite a few plants that are available that have been bred for nematode resistance. And so if you know that you're really struggling with nematodes, check out the little descriptors in seed catalogs and find nematode resistant varieties of things like tomatoes. If you're using a raised bed or pots or planter boxes, and you know you're in a nematode part of the country, as in like most of the southern half of the country, it's really a good idea to start with soil that's not from the ground, because if you just dig out soil from the ground and put it in a box or a planter, you've just created a wonderful little environment for nematodes. So starting with some bagged soil is really helpful. Using mulch is also quite helpful, and that using mulch is a really important piece of keeping a healthy soil food web alive and happy. Using mulch helps keep soil moisture and temperature stable, and that helps to support all the beneficials in your soil. And then remember that nematodes they're microscopic. And so you don't really think necessarily about the dirt that's on your hands or on the soles of your shoes or on your garden trowel, but that's how nematodes travel from place to place. They don't actually travel very far on their own. We move them around through our efforts. And so sanitizing your hands and tools between garden beds is key. And then it's really hard to have a garden without things like carrots and tomatoes, right? To me, I have to have things like carrots and tomatoes to be a happy gardener. But if I grow carrots and tomatoes every year in exactly the same spot down here in Florida and throughout most of the southern United States, I'm going to end up with some nematode populations that are just going to prevent success. So rotating out those crops that you know are really susceptible to nematodes, keep them out of certain beds for like 2 or 3 years. Plant brassicas, plant herbs, plant flowers, and things like that, and then rotate them back in. That just helps to keep those populations down. Really strong smelling flowers. There's a lot of research that has gone into strong smelling flowers like like marigolds. Some of that research shows that there might be a good correlation, a good effect in keeping nematode populations down. Other studies are showing actually not so much. So that's definitely some ongoing research, but having flowers in your garden is never a bad thing. So plant them, especially those strong smelling flowers. It may have an impact on nematodes. And then one method that a lot of folks down here really like to experiment with is this method that we call solarization, which is literally using the heat of the sun. You cover your garden bed with a big sheet of clear plastic, and cover it really tightly, and then use the heat of the sun during summer to literally cook, using the greenhouse effect, all of the nematodes that are in the soil. The problem with using solarization is that it also literally cooks every other living thing in the soil. So you're really starting over in terms of having a healthy soil food web when you use solarization. But if you're absolutely desperate, it is a good way to kickstart a decrease in nematode populations. So that's, I think I went a little over. I did. I went 5 minutes longer than I intended. But there we go. That is a little introduction to nematodes and how to keep their populations in check. So that's what we've got for you today. Thank you all so very much. I hope that you have some things to ponder in terms of this wild world of nematodes. They are a pretty incredible creature that have an impact far beyond their size. So thank you so much, and hopefully we will see you next week.